"You're overreacting," my son said, as if you weren't standing in my kitchen holding a document that could wipe away nearly every memory I've ever built inside these walls. He said it so casually, too, like he was letting me know the weather forecast, not quietly suggesting I leave the home I've spent over 4 decades keeping alive. Daniel always had that tone, measured, too calm, the same voice he used when he was 12 and shattered my favorite glass bowl, trying to convince me the crack was already there. Only now he wasn't 12, and this wasn't a bowl. This was my life. The envelope in his hand looked harmless, white, neatly sealed, my name written across it in handwriting I used to think was beautiful. I taught those hands how to tie shoes, how to stir batter, how to write thank you notes. Now those same hands were holding something from the county office with numbers and codes I didn't fully understand, but I understood one thing very clearly. He wanted me gone. He stood there in boots that never touched mud, a jacket that cost more than I spend on groceries in a month, and eyes that didn't know how to look at me without calculation anymore. "Just read it," Daniel said, nodding toward the envelope like it was some kind of thoughtful gift. "We've been talking about this for months, Mom. The house is too big for you. You said yourself the stairs are getting harder." I didn't answer. I set the kettle on the stove instead. My fingers trembled just slightly, but I curled them around the handle until they settled. He didn't need to see my hands shake. He would take it as evidence, proof that he was right, proof that I was too old for the house I made a home. He glanced out the window to where their new SUV sat in my driveway, still smelling of dealership polish, blocking the gate James built by hand. The gate Daniel once climbed as a boy because he believed the top of it was a pirate ship mast. I could still hear his laughter on some nights when the wind was just right. "We're moving to Brookshade," he said, the name of the new town sounding like a trophy in his mouth. "Better schools for the kids, more space, and we want to put this place on the market to help with the down payment. It's the best option." The best option for who? I finally looked at him, really looked. Not at the grown man who managed accounts and quarterly reports, but at the boy who once cried when he lost a mitten. I searched his face for something familiar, but all I found was a stranger wearing my son's eyes. "You told me," I said quietly, "that I could live here for the rest of my life." He blinked, looked away, then back at me. "That was before we knew how much the property is worth, before we understood the upkeep and how unsafe it is for you to be alone out here." Unsafe. Funny, I never felt unsafe until this moment. The kettle whistled, sharp and urgent, as if it wanted to argue on my behalf. I turned off the burner, poured myself tea, and sat down. Daniel didn't sit. He stood over me like a doctor preparing to deliver bad news he had already accepted. "You can move into a community, a nice one. They have activities, nurses, even a game room. You'd make friends." Friends. As if I hadn't buried the only true friend I ever needed 8 years ago, when James took his last breath in the bedroom facing the garden we planted together. As if loneliness could be solved with bingo nights and beige hallways. I lifted my cup and took a slow sip. It tasted different today, like the tea knew something had shifted. "So you've already decided. This isn't a conversation. This is notice." He exhaled hard through his nose. "I wanted to be honest. We're trying to help you, Mom. You should be grateful we're thinking ahead." Grateful.
To be removed like old furniture? To be packaged away quietly so they could start fresh? I set the cup down gently. My voice didn't rise, not once.
"I will not thank you," I said. "Not for this." He opened his mouth, closed it again, then gave a tight little nod. "You have time to think about it. A few weeks at least. I'll come back so we can talk next steps." He placed the envelope on the table, patted it twice with a brisk, businesslike finality, and walked to the door. For a moment, I thought he might turn around, might realize what he had done, what line he had crossed. He didn't. The door clicked shut behind him. I didn't cry. At 76 years old, you learn the difference between heartbreak and insult. This wasn't heartbreak. No. Heartbreak was quieter, deeper, in the dark of a hospital room when machines stopped beeping. This was something else entirely. This was betrayal, folded neatly into an envelope. I reached for it finally, slid a finger beneath the seal, and unfolded my son's decision to erase me from my own life. I read every line. Then I whispered to the empty house, "Not yet. You will not take me from here. Not like this." I didn't sleep much that night. The house shifted and settled around me like it always did, the pipes humming, the old wood breathing with the cold. But the silence wasn't the usual kind. It had an edge to it, like the quiet right before a storm breaks a good roof. At sunrise, I folded the eviction notice and tucked it into the bottom drawer of my desk. Not to hide it. I knew exactly where it was. I just needed the kitchen table cleared, as if space on the wood might help me find space in my mind. The porch boards groaned under my feet as I stepped outside for the paper. The morning fog clung to the grass, gray and heavy, the kind that softens every shape except the one you don't want to see. Daniel's tire tracks still carved through the gravel like a reminder. I boiled water for coffee, set out 2 mugs out of habit, one for me, one for James. 8 years gone, and I still hadn't learned how to pour for one. I sat there, staring at the steam curling out of my cup, and that's when the memory rose, uninvited, like all painful ones. The lawyer's office, the ink, my shaking hand, the day I signed the deed over to Daniel. He told me it was only to prevent trouble later, that it would keep things easy if something ever happened to me. I was tired back then, fresh from the funeral, my bones still hollow from grief. I believed him. He said, "You'll always live here, Mom. Everybody knows that. This is just paperwork." Paperwork. That word tasted different now, bitter, like burned coffee grounds. By noon, I still hadn't eaten more than a bite of toast. My body stayed in the chair, but my mind kept pacing the hallway. I finally pulled out an old manila folder from the cabinet. The deed was there. His name alone. My mistake, in cursive.
At 2:10 p.m., I heard tires again. Slow. Deliberate. I didn't even need to look. Rachel always parked too close to the steps, like the house might run off if she didn't pin it in. She stepped out wearing a beige coat and boots meant for clean sidewalks, not my worn path. Her perfume reached the porch before she did. Something cold and sharp. "Hi, Martha," she called, waving like we were friends, and not pieces in the same ugly plan. I didn't wave back. She followed me inside without waiting for an invitation. She always did that. Entered like the house somehow belonged to her already. "I know Daniel spoke to you yesterday," she began, settling into James's recliner as if she had the right. "And I just want to make sure you understand, this isn't personal." "Isn't it?" I asked. My voice surprised even me, steady, not a tremor in it. Rachel crossed her legs, smoothing her coat. "It's about planning ahead. You shouldn't be managing such a large property alone. Assisted living has so many modern options now. Activities, salon services, even yoga. I stared at her. Rachel, I asked softly, have you ever seen me do yoga? She blinked, thrown for half a second. Well, no, but you could learn. I let the silence sit long enough for her to feel it, then said, you want the house money. Her breath caught. Not much, but enough. A tiny crack in the polished surface. The market is strong, she admitted finally, and a sale now would allow us all to benefit. Daniel's job is uncertain, and the boys could use a better school system. You'd be helping everyone. Helping them. Right. That's what this was supposed to feel like. A generous donation of my entire life. I stood, went to the counter, and returned with a plate of warm spice cookies. Your boys loved these. Used to sneak them before dinner. Rachel took one, bit into it politely, though I could tell she wished she hadn't. Delicious, she lied.
I sat again. Tell Daniel something for me, I said. No more papers. If he wants to discuss something, he comes here as a son, not a landlord. Rachel drew in a slow breath. We're just trying to keep you safe. No, I said. You're trying to keep me conveniently placed where I can't interfere with your plans. She stood then, coat smoothing again, voice tight. I hope you think about the future, Martha. I am, I replied, for the first time in a while. She left without finishing the cookie. I wrapped the remaining batch, placed them in the freezer, waste not, and then sat at the table with a pen and pad. At the top of a clean page, I wrote, people I can call who remember who I am, and I began listing names I hadn't said out loud in years. That night, sleep didn't come. I wandered the hallway, fingers trailing the wall James once painted himself. When the heater kicked on, I sat in his old recliner and stared at the deed again. His name, not mine. I whispered into the dim room, "You promised, Daniel." Just then, a thought came, sharp, sudden, alive. A promise spoken might still matter, and if it mattered, maybe someone needed to hear it, someone who understood more than family politeness and quiet betrayal, someone who knew the law. The next morning, I picked up the phone.
I didn't dial my son. I dialed a law office. Not out of spite, not yet, but because my hands needed to do something other than tremble. The phone rang 3 times before a voice answered, too cheerful for what I was carrying in my throat. Fenton and Older Legal Services, this is Rebecca. How may I direct your call today? I cleared my voice. Property rights? I said, and tenancy? I need to speak with someone who understands both. There was a brief pause, the kind that tells you someone is now sitting up straighter. Are you currently facing an issue regarding residence or ownership, ma'am? Yes, I answered. My son is trying to remove me from my home. The way she inhaled told me she had heard stories like mine before, stories with endings that split families in half. She transferred me. A click, a quieter line, then a new voice. Older, slower, a tone made of legal pages and experience. This is attorney Ms. Garner. I understand you've received an attempt of eviction? I explained everything. The deed, the promise, the envelope, the words Daniel used, "You should be grateful." By the time I finished, I realized my hand was pressed against my chest, steadying a breath I hadn't taken yet. Ms. Garner's voice softened but stayed firm. Martha, I need you to understand something clearly. A deed in another person's name does not always erase an established right of residence, especially if there was a verbal or implied lifetime agreement. But it wasn't written, I said. It was spoken in my kitchen years ago. Spoken agreements can still be considered, she told me, especially if there is evidence of the intention, letters, witnesses, documents, financial involvement. Have you continued paying
Expenses for the home since the transfer? Yes, I breathed. Every bill, every repair. Good, she replied. That strengthens your position. Do you have any proof that your son intended you to remain in the home for life? A memory struck me then, clear as winter glass. James' handwriting. In the garage, in a box, in an envelope I hadn't opened in years. I whispered. She told me what to gather. Utility bills, property tax receipts, any written letters from James or Daniel, even old holiday cards if they mentioned the home. And one more thing, Ms. Garner added. Do you have anyone who can speak to the agreement? Anyone who heard it or understood it the same way you did? Someone had. My grandson. Andrew. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not because something happened, just because time sometimes runs faster than love can catch. But he had been there the day Daniel promised me, that first conversation after the funeral. He was 16 then, old enough to remember. I think I do, I said. Good. Bring everything you can to my office. How soon can you come? I didn't even hesitate. Tomorrow. The house felt different after the call. Not healed, not safe, but steadier, as if some part of it had been waiting for me to stand up for it. I went to the garage before I lost my momentum. The air was cold, smelling of dust and old soil. James's handwriting was everywhere on the boxes. The curves and slants I knew better than my own. I found the one I wanted, a faded label that read, Lake Trip Letters, Tools, Receipts. Inside were wrenches, a rusted fishing lure, and a small bundle of envelopes tied with twine. My breath caught. I carried them inside like they were made of glass. At the kitchen table, I untied the twine and unfolded the first letter. The ink had faded, but the words hadn't. Martha, if anything ever happens to me, don't let this house stop being yours. It has your name on it, even if the papers say otherwise. I touched the paper like I might touch his hand again. The next letter, scribbled on a scrap of lined paper, if Daniel ever talks about selling, remind him who kept the lights on and the doors open. Remind him you built this life too. My eyes blurred, but no tears fell. Not yet. I placed the letters carefully into a folder. The next morning, I dressed slowly but deliberately. Good coat, wool scarf, the shoes that didn't pinch. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked older than I felt. There was something new in my eyes, though. Not anger, not yet, but something sharper than sorrow. Resolve, maybe. The drive to town was quiet, except for the hum of the heater. The law office sat in a modern building with glass doors that slid open silently, like secrets being invited inside. Miss Garner was in her early 50s, silver at her temples, glasses that didn't soften anything. She shook my hand with a grip that told me I had walked into the right office. We spent an hour reviewing documents. She read James's letters twice, jaw tightening the way people do when something angers them on someone else's behalf. These are strong, and your continued financial responsibility for the home will matter greatly. We'll file a petition for a stay. Once submitted, your son cannot remove you, list the property, or proceed with a sale until the court decides. I exhaled slowly. So I won't be forced out yet? No, she said. Not yet, and potentially not ever. Her confidence wrapped around me like a shawl I didn't know I needed. When I left the office, the winter air sharp on my cheeks, I felt taller, not in inches, but in years reclaimed. When I returned home, an SUV was parked out front. Daniel wasn't alone. Movers stood by the truck, waiting. He walked up the driveway toward me, jaw set, voice too loud. "Mom, we're doing this today. The apartment is ready, and I'm not arguing anymore." I didn't raise my voice. I simply handed him a copy of the legal filing Ms. Garner had prepared and sent electronically. "It's filed," I said. "You can't move me. Not today. Not until the court decides." He stopped walking. His face changed. Not into a son's face. Into a man who had just discovered his mother was no longer a thing that could be moved. "What did you do?" he asked. I met his eyes. "Exactly what you taught me growing up," I said. "I stood up for myself." And then, before either of us spoke again, the movers began to load back into the truck. The movers were gone within minutes, their truck rumbling down the road until it disappeared behind the row of old pines. Daniel stood there for a moment, his breath sharp in the cold, his hands still holding the paper that said he couldn't touch a single thing I owned. Not legally, not anymore. He left without another word. When the house fell quiet again, I let myself sit in James' old recliner. The leather had softened with time, the way skin does when it has held enough years. I closed my eyes and listened, not to the silence, but to the memory beneath it. The slam of a screen door, a boy's laughter, the sound of a fishing rod being set down on the porch, James humming while he sharpened his tools. Not ghosts, just the house remembering. It was late afternoon when I heard the next car. Not the polished hum of Daniel's SUV, but something older. A rattle in the exhaust, a rhythm of a vehicle that had lived an honest life. When I looked out the window, I recognized the shape before I saw the face. Andrew. My grandson. He took longer to get out of the car than I expected, like he wasn't sure if he was welcome. He shut the door, then paused with his hand on the roof, scanning the house, the porch, the windows, like he was trying to take back a memory someone stole from him. He used to run up these steps. Now, he walked. Slow, careful. He knocked twice, the same way he always did as a boy, 2 short taps, never 3. I opened the door before he could knock again. "Grandma," he said, voice low, almost cautious. "Can I come in?" "You already know you can," I said, stepping aside. He slipped off his shoes without being told. Some habits survive growing up. I poured tea. He didn't need to ask. 2 sugars for him, no more, no less. Some people change, but some things hold. We sat at the kitchen table in silence first, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that waits. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't know, not until last night." "You didn't know what, sweetheart?" "What Dad was doing. The eviction. The house. Any of it. I heard them arguing." Arguing. Daniel and Rachel. I couldn't quite imagine it. Not the arguing, but the idea that any part of my son was cracking. Still, Andrew wouldn't lie. "What did they say?" I asked, though I braced myself. Andrew's jaw tightened. He said it'll be easier once you're settled somewhere else. And Dad said you were being difficult, that you didn't understand what was best for you. There it was again, that sentence. The one people use when they're about to take something that isn't theirs. You don't understand what's best for you. "I understand perfectly," I said. "I just don't agree." He nodded, eyes down. Then he looked up. Grandma, why did you sign the house over to Dad in the first place? I could have told him the short version. I could have said I was tired, or grieving, or that Daniel promised me the house was still mine to live in until I died. But the truth was longer than one sentence.
When your grandfather passed, I said softly, I was drowning without water. Everything felt heavy. The paperwork, the bank meetings, decisions I didn't want to make. Daniel said he would take care of it. Take care of me. I believed him. That's all. Andrew nodded, slow, absorbing every word. I remember the day he said you'd live here forever, he whispered. I remember him saying that. I reached across the table and placed my hand on his. That matters, Andrew. He swallowed, and I saw something shifting, like the moment a boy stops being a witness and starts being a man with a choice. What are you going to do now? He asked. I already started, I said. I hired a lawyer. His eyes widened, not in shock, but in a kind of pride I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Good. The kettle clicked behind us. Neither of us moved to pour more tea. Then, softer, he asked, Can I testify if it goes to court? I want to tell them what I remember. My throat tightened, not with tears, but with something heavier. You would do that? For you? Yes, and because it's the truth. We sat like that a while longer, letting silence stitch the moment together. Before he left, he stood at the doorway and turned back, voice low. I'm with you, Grandma, no matter how this goes. When the door closed, I didn't crumble. I didn't fold into myself like paper under rain. I stood taller. The next morning, I went looking for the things Miss Garner said I might need. Bills, tax receipts, proof of maintenance. My name was on all of them. And then I found something else, something I didn't know I'd been searching for.
A photo, taken in the driveway. Daniel, maybe 11 years old, holding the birdhouse he built with James. Sawdust stuck to his sweater, a smile wide enough to steal a piece of sunlight. On the back, James had written, "He thinks he built this house. One day, he'll understand who really did." I held that picture like a confession. Not his, but mine. I had built this house. I kept it standing. And now I would keep myself standing, too. At dusk, the phone rang. I didn't answer, but I listened to the message. "Mom, we need to talk. Please call me back." Not yet. Let him sit with the silence. Let him wonder when his mother learned to stop being a wall he could lean on and became a door he could no longer open.
When the sun rose the next day, I noticed something I had not felt in weeks. Not relief, not peace, but direction. A map drawn by necessity. A woman can wander through grief for years, but the trail gives her a compass. I drank my coffee at the kitchen table, my folders stacked neatly beside me. Evidence. Proof. My life, reduced to paper, but still mine. The phone rang at 9:12 a.m. "Miss Garner." "We filed the emergency petition," she said. "Your son will receive the notice today. Once he does, neither he nor his wife nor any representative can force a move, begin packing, or list the property for sale." I closed my eyes. "Thank you." "We're not finished," she replied. "This is simply the first gate. They may still fight it." "I know, and I'm ready." I wasn't sure I believed myself, but I said it anyway. Sometimes a sentence needs to be said out loud before it becomes true. The first message. Daniel didn't call. Rachel didn't either. Instead, at 11:03 a.m., I received a text message from an unknown number. We need access to the property for appraisal. Please confirm availability this week. I stared at it for a long moment, then forwarded it to Miss Garner. Her reply was immediate. Do not respond. They're attempting to undermine the stay. I will handle it. A minute later, she sent a second message. You are not to allow appraisers, photographers, agents, or inspectors onto your property. If anyone arrives, you call me. Do you understand? I did, and for the first time, I realized how deeply I had always answered yes to everyone else. I had agreed myself into corners my entire life, but not today.
Today, I guarded the threshold. At 3:40 p.m., I saw a car I didn't recognize pull into the driveway. A woman stepped out carrying a clipboard. Professional. Neutral coat, neat hair, business smile. An appraiser. She walked toward the porch. Hello, she called with a practiced cheerfulness. I'm here to take preliminary photos of the property. Not today, I answered through the screen door. Oh, I have authorization from the owner. No, you have authorization from the name on a deed that does not give you access to my home. She blinked, clearly not used to a grandmother with legal terminology. I'll need written denial. You'll get it from my attorney, I said, then closed the wooden door and locked it. My hands shook, but not from fear, from power. It was unfamiliar, but it fit. I watched her walk back to her car, dialing a number with a frustrated flick of her wrist. She did not return. Just after sunset, someone knocked on my door. Not with force, but gently, like a memory asking permission to return. It was my neighbor, Ellen. We had raised our children side by side, shared casseroles, snow shovels, and sorrow. I heard there was a moving truck yesterday, she said softly. I didn't want to believe it. They left empty, and I intend to keep it that way. She came inside, carrying a container covered in a cloth napkin, chicken and rice. She always cooked enough for an army, even when life gave her more battles than soldiers. Do you need anything? She asked. I need the strength to finish this. You have it, she said. You just forgot where you put it. Then she leaned in slightly. And you are not alone in this. Everyone on this street knows whose house this is. That sentence landed somewhere deep, a root finding soil. The call I didn't expect. At 8:22 p.m., the phone rang. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. It wasn't Daniel. It was Rachel. Martha, she began, voice tight, why are you escalating this? We could have handled this as a family. As a family, you came with movers, I echoed, choosing each word. That wasn't my decision. Rachel, you stood in my living room and told me I should try yoga. Silence. Then sharper. You're making this harder than it needs to be. People your age don't finish that sentence, I warned. My voice steady. I'm not a problem to be solved. Another silence, longer this time. We'll see you in court, then, she finally said. And for the first time, those words didn't scare me. I answered. Wear something respectful. You'll be facing the woman who built the house you're trying to sell. I ended the call. My hand didn't shake this time. Later that night, I sat with the old letters again. James's handwriting no longer hurt to look at. It felt like a witness. Then I opened the window and let the night air in, cold and honest. I whispered, "I'm still here." The house, in its creaking old language, whispered back.
2 mornings later, frost spread across the yard like a thin sheet of glass. I stood at the kitchen counter, buttering toast I wasn't hungry for, when I saw a familiar SUV pull into my driveway. Daniel. He got out alone this time. No movers, no clipboards, no rehearsed smile. But anger has a posture, and he wore it. I stepped outside before he could knock. The cold bit my cheeks, but I didn't mind it. Winter has a way of reminding a person they're still alive. "We need to talk," he said, crossing his arms. "All right," I answered, "but we talk out here." He looked past me, toward the house, like he believed walls would take his side. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Daniel," I said, "this isn't something I'm doing. It's something I'm refusing to let you do." His jaw shifted, and for a moment, I saw not the man, but the boy who used to cry when a fishing line tangled. The boy who once brought me a handful of wild daisies, roots and all. But that boy was gone. A man with plans stood in his place. "You don't understand the position we're in," he said. "The market won't stay strong. If we sell now, we can get a good price, move into a better district, invest for the future." "For your future," I corrected. "For everyone's," he insisted. I shook my head slowly. "You're not trying to secure a future. You're trying to erase a past. My past. Your father's past." His eyes flinched, even if he tried to hide it. And then, over his shoulder, I saw another car pull up along the street.
"Andrew."
He stepped out and walked toward us, not rushing, but with purpose. He stopped beside me, nodding once as if to say, "I heard enough." Daniel stiffened. "You don't need to be here for this." Andrew didn't move. "Actually, I do." There are moments in life when a house becomes more than wood and walls, when it becomes a witness. I felt it then, standing between my son and my grandson, as though the home itself listened. We walked down the driveway, stopping near the old wooden fence James built the year our peach trees died. A fitting place, I suppose, to talk about things that once thrived. Daniel faced us both. "So this is it? You're both against me?" Andrew crossed his arms. "No, I'm against the decision. That's different." Daniel scoffed. "You're 22. You don't get it." Andrew's voice stayed level. "I get enough. I heard you promise Grandma after Grandpa died. I was right there." He turned toward me, eyes hard. "You really brought him into this?" "I didn't need to," I said. "You did that yourself when you broke your word." He stepped closer. "Mom, stop turning this into something ugly." I replied, "You brought movers to my house. It was already ugly." He didn't deny it. I didn't notice at first, but our neighbor, Mr. Collins, was trimming hedges along the property line. He was a quiet man, retired, rarely involved in anything except lawn care and crossword puzzles. But he paused now, shears in hand, clearly listening.
Daniel followed my gaze and lowered his voice. "Too late. This house is wasted on you," he muttered. "You don't need 4 bedrooms. You don't even go upstairs anymore." "That's true," I answered calmly. "I sleep downstairs now." "Then what is the point?" he snapped. "Why hold on to something you can't even use?" I met his eyes. "Because use does not determine value. If it did, you wouldn't be standing in front of me expecting something you didn't earn." That made him stop. Just for a breath. I continued. Softer. Not to wound, but to remind. "I raised you in this home. I cooked here. I stitched curtains for windows you used to fog up in winter. I carried you through fevers. Your father fixed that roof in the rain.
And you would sell it for hardwood floors and a school district brochure? Daniel's lips parted, but he didn't speak. Andrew did. The house isn't wasting away. You just stopped remembering what it meant. Daniel's voice cracked. Not loud, but sharp. You have no idea how much pressure I'm under. You think I want to be the one who makes these decisions? I answered, you already made them when you put a deadline on your mother's life. Daniel stepped back, pressing a hand against his forehead. So what now? Court? Public hearings? You want the whole world to see us like this? No, I said. I want my home. And I want a son who remembers what a promise means. He stared at me for a long time. Then he turned and walked to his car, pulling the door open.
Before getting in, he said, "This isn't over." Andrew spoke before I could. "Maybe it should be." Daniel drove away. I exhaled slowly, realizing I had been holding breath without noticing. Andrew put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" "Yes," I said, surprised that I meant it. Mr. Collins leaned over the fence. "Martha?" "Yes?" I heard all of that. And if the court needs someone to speak on your behalf, you let me know. A promise is a promise, and a home is a home. I thanked him, and he meant it when he nodded. I looked at the house then, its portrayal, its chipped paint, its stubborn windows. It didn't look weak. It looked ready. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, tucked between a grocery flyer and a church newsletter I no longer attended. A plain white envelope, no return address. But I knew before opening it what it was. The court summons. The paper felt heavier than it should have when I unfolded it at the dining table. My reading glasses slid slightly down my nose as I followed the lines. 2 weeks from Friday. My name printed on the first line, Daniel's on the next. Mother versus son. I stayed seated for a long while. The clock ticked above me, the same one that hung there since my wedding day, a gift from James's mother. The tick had comforted me through colic cries, teenage arguments, long nights waiting for Daniel to come home. Now it sounded like it was counting down. I folded the paper carefully and placed it back into the envelope. My hand didn't shake, but I felt a tremor inside, deep in the marrow. It was really happening. That afternoon, a text flashed on my phone. I rarely received texts anymore, so the sound startled me. It was from Rachel. "We can still handle this without court. Move out before the 1st and we'll pay for a small apartment." I stared at the message, waiting for more. A second text arrived. "It's best for everyone. Let's be adults about this." Adults. Funny word coming from someone who celebrated the idea of me being gone. I typed slowly, each letter deliberate. "No, we will speak in court." I set the phone down. I didn't check for a reply. Some battles are not conversations. The next morning, I sat across from Ms. Garner at her office. The room smelled faintly of printer ink and peppermint tea. She wore her reading glasses low and flipped through a stack of documents. "You read the summons?" she asked. "Yes." "It's going to be a tight case," she warned. "Not unwinnable, but tight. Your strongest angle is promissory estoppel. He made a promise, and you relied on it to your detriment." "In English?" I asked. "He told you this would be your home for life. You put money in,
You stopped preparing for another place to live. That promise has value in the law." I nodded. It had value in my heart long before that. Ms. Garner's eyes softened. "I know." She tapped a paper at the top of the stack. "We will also argue undue influence, emotional coercion, and elder vulnerability. Courts listen when a parent is pushed out of a home they paid for." I exhaled. "Do you think I'll win?" She didn't answer right away. She folded her hands, elbows on the desk. "I think you deserve to win," she said. When I arrived home, a second envelope waited on the porch. Not official, not typed, handwritten. I recognized the handwriting before I touched it. My daughter, Melissa. I stood frozen in the doorway. We hadn't spoken in almost 4 years, not after the argument that ended in slammed doors, voicemail silence, and a Thanksgiving chair left empty on both sides. I sat in my chair by the window before opening it. The letter was short. "Mom, I heard from Andrew what's happening. I don't know if I have any right to say this, but I want to be there at the hearing. No matter what has been broken between us, you shouldn't face this alone. If you'll let me, I'll come. Mel." I read it twice, 3 times. My chest felt warm and strange, like emotion waking from hibernation. I whispered into the quiet room, "I never wanted to face anything without you." But I didn't cry. Not yet. A visit from Andrew. That evening, Andrew showed up without warning. I heard his car door, then his quick footsteps on the porch. He didn't knock like a guest. He walked in like family. "I heard you got the date," he said. "Yes, I'll be there." There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just truth, spoken simply, how promises should sound. He walked to the hallway, touching the family pictures as he passed. One of him at age 9 missing a front tooth, one of Daniel holding him on his shoulders. He paused, fingertips over the glass. "Dad used to be good," he said quietly. "I know."
What happened? I swallowed. Sometimes life bends a person, sometimes it breaks them, and sometimes people choose the easier wound. He sat beside me. "Grandma?" "Yes?" "If you lose, what happens?" I answered honestly, "I won't have a home." He looked down, fists closed. "Then we won't lose." So certain, so young. I placed a hand over his. "It might. Courts are not always about fairness." He lifted his head, eyes bright, not with tears, but conviction. "Then we make them listen."
Later, when the house grew quiet, I made chamomile tea, held it close to feel the warmth through the cup. I walked room to room, my hand brushing walls, memories rising like dust in sunlight. Here, Daniel took his first steps. Here, James danced with me on our 25th anniversary. Here, I stood the morning I learned he wouldn't live to see another winter. Rooms remember. I opened the back door. The night air carried the smell of wood, grass, and the faint sweetness of old peach trees that never grew fruit again. Lights glowed from Daniel's house down the street. Laughter carried. I wasn't invited, but for once, it didn't hollow me out, because I wasn't waiting for a door to open. I was preparing to walk through one of my own.
The courthouse smelled like old books and polished floors, a scent that always made me feel like I was walking into a library where silence had authority. Andrew held the door for me as we entered, and the click of it closing behind us sounded final, like a lock turning on a chapter I never meant to write. I wore my navy coat, the one James bought me during a winter trip to Oregon, long before the children were grown and life became complicated in all the quiet, painful ways people don't talk about at barbecues. My breath trembled once as we walked down the hall, but I steadied myself. We passed room 204, our courtroom. Andrew placed his hand gently over mine. "We've got this." I didn't answer, but I squeezed back once, a small, silent promise. Daniel was already there, sitting beside Rachel at the respondents' table. He wore a gray suit, hair slicked back the way he used to before job interviews. He didn't look at me when I entered. Rachel did. A quick glance, eyes sharp, as though assessing whether I appeared fragile enough to lose. I took my seat beside Miss Garner, who offered a folder and a quiet reminder. "Remember, answer slowly, tell the truth, let the silence work for you." Silence. I had lived enough of it to know what it could do. The court judge entered, robes brushing the floor in a sound like pages turning. We rose, then sat when instructed. The proceedings began.
Rachel's attorney spoke first, wording each sentence like a blade wrapped in silk. "Your Honor, this is a sad case. A family matter that should have been resolved privately. My clients, Daniel and Rachel, have acted in the best interest of all involved. They graciously offered housing for Daniel's mother for years. Now, with 3 young children and financial pressures, they must relocate. The home belongs to them, legally and rightfully. They simply seek possession of their own property." Graciously offered. As though I hadn't accepted my money. As though I had wandered in uninvited. Then Miss Garner stood, voice firm. "This is not about legal ownership alone. It is about a promise made to a grieving widow, that the home she helped purchase using $38,000 from her retirement funds would be her residence for life. The respondents benefited financially and emotionally from my client's contribution, and now intend to remove her. We will show evidence of reliance, documentation, and witness testimony supporting that promise." The judge nodded. Then it began. When they called my name, I walked to the stand, each step echoing in my ears. I took the oath, hand raised, voice steady. "Miss Hayes, can you tell the court how that house was purchased?" I described the day James and I realized Daniel needed help, how we had sold our lake cabin, our retirement dream, to provide the down payment. "How much did you contribute?" she asked. $38,000, I said, everything we had saved. "And what were you told in exchange?" I took a breath. That it would always be my home, that I would never have to worry, not after losing my husband. "Who told you that?" "My son, Daniel." I did not look at him when I said it. The cross-examination. Rachel's attorney approached. "Mrs. Hayes, do you have a written contract guaranteeing lifetime residence?" "No," I said. "So legally, it was a gift, correct?" "Yes." "And you cannot prove the existence of a promise, correct?" I lifted my eyes to her. "I can prove I believed a son's word." Murmurs rustled through the room. The attorney frowned. "Please answer only the question asked." I folded my hands. I did. A witness no one expected. Miss Garner stood. "Your Honor, the petitioner calls a surprise witness." Daniel looked up sharply. "A what?" The side door opened, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Melissa, my daughter. She walked in slowly, dressed in a dark green coat, hair pulled back. We hadn't stood in the same room in years. Regret flickered across her face, but she remained steady as she took the stand. Miss Garner approached.
Miss Hayes, can you tell the court what you witnessed after your father passed away? Melissa's voice wavered only once. I was there the night Daniel told Mom she would never have to move. He said the house was hers as long as she lived. We all heard it. Daniel's face drained of color. Rachel stiffened. Melissa continued, eyes glistening. My mother has never asked for anything but family. She gave up her savings, she lost her husband, and now she's losing her home because people forget that promises don't disappear just because they become inconvenient. The courtroom went silent. Not legal language, not strategy. Truth, spoken plainly. When Melissa stepped down, she passed me. Just before returning to her seat, she whispered, I'm sorry, Mom. It was barely audible, but it landed inside me like a seed in thawing ground. The judge called a recess. People stood, papers shuffled, but I stayed seated, hands clasped in my lap. Andrew leaned in. She showed up. Yes, I whispered. She did. As the courtroom emptied for break, he approached me. Rachel stayed behind, arms crossed. He didn't sit, just stood over me, voice low. Why are you doing this, Mom? I looked up at him, not angry, not pleading, just honest. Because the moment you tried to push me out of that house, you stopped being my safe place, so I had to become my own. His lips tightened. His throat worked around words he couldn't form. Then he walked away. And for the first time, I did not watch him go.
Verdict day arrived, disguised as an ordinary morning. The sky was gray, not the dramatic kind that warns of storms, but the soft, even gray that looks like the world forgot to wake up. I moved through the house slowly, touching the back of chairs, picture frames, curtains I had sewn myself. I wasn't saying goodbye. I was making sure I remembered how it felt to stand inside my own life. Andrew drove me to the courthouse. Neither of us talked much. Some silences are heavy. This one was steady, like a hand at my back, guiding without pushing. When we entered the courtroom, Daniel was already there. His tie wasn't straight. His eyes looked tired. Rachel whispered something to him, but he didn't react. I noticed the distance between them, small at first, then unmistakable. Consequences have a way of rearranging people. Miss Garner greeted me with a folder pressed to her chest. Whatever happens, you stood up for yourself. That matters. I nodded. Thank you. The judge entered and everyone rose. My pulse wasn't racing. I felt something else entirely. Readiness. The judge began with a measured voice. This is a painful case. The law deals with property, but the heart deals with history. Today, we address both.
Rachel's attorney spoke briefly, repeating their argument. Legal title, financial strain, a family's future. Then Ms. Garner stood, posture straight, voice even. A promise is not less real because it's spoken instead of written. She placed a single sheet of paper on the judge's desk. A letter. The courtroom shifted. Curiosity, surprise, tension all at once. This, she continued, is a statement written by Martha's late husband, found among her documents and dated during the time of the home purchase. It references the intent behind the down payment. My breath stilled. She had never shown me that letter. I didn't know she had it. The judge read silently, then aloud, slowly. If anything happens to me, this house must remain Martha's home. She put her life into this family, and no one, least of all our son, should take it from her. Signed in his handwriting, James Hayes. The room did not move. Even the air seemed to wait. Daniel closed his eyes. Rachel's expression cracked, splintering into something that looked almost like fear. The judge folded his hands. Though ownership is legally in the respondent's name, The evidence shows a clear expectation and reliance of lifetime residence. Therefore,
I stopped breathing. The court grants Martha Hayes a life estate in the property. She may remain in the home for the duration of her life. No sale, transfer, or eviction can be enforced without her explicit consent. A sound left me. Not a sob. Something quieter. The sound of a weight set down after being carried too far. The judge continued. Furthermore, because undue influence appears to have been exerted, the court recommends mediation for the family and will schedule a review hearing in 6 months. A gavel struck wood. It was done. Andrew let out a breath he must have been holding since we walked in. Ms. Garner touched my hand once, gently. Victory without the need for celebration. Daniel remained still, staring at the table. Rachel looked away first. Outside, the air felt lighter, as if the sky finally remembered how to breathe. Andrew walked beside me. You did it. We did. All of us. Even your Aunt Melissa. As if summoned by her name, Melissa stepped out from the courthouse doors. Her eyes met mine. "Mom," she said. Once that word would have reopened every unfinished wound between us. But now it felt like a door someone was willing to hold open. "Thank you for coming," I told her.
She swallowed. I wasn't there when Dad got sick. I wasn't there after. I don't know if I could make up for that, but I don't want to lose any more years. Her voice trembled. I don't either. We did not hug. Not yet. Some reunions begin quieter than others. She looked past me, toward Daniel across the courtyard. He wasn't looking at us. He stood alone, hands in his pockets, staring down like the verdict weighed more than he ever expected. "Will you talk to him?" she asked. "Not today," I answered. "Today I go home." I did not expect Daniel to approach, but he did. He stopped a few feet away, eyes red, not from anger this time. I thought I was doing what was right for my family. I am your family. I always was. He nodded slowly. I lost my way. I didn't tell him he had hurt me. He already knew. I didn't tell him I forgave him. He would need to earn that. But I offered him something small, something real. You can come by this Sunday. Dinner is at 5, if you want. His voice cracked. Okay. He stepped back. I watched him walk to his car, not as a man I needed to chase, not as a son I had to lose, just a person learning.
When I opened the door to my house, the floor creaked the same familiar note. The curtain swayed with the same soft draft. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. I set my coat on the hook, ran my fingers along the dining table, and whispered into the quiet, "I'm home." 2 words, but this time they were true.
Because a home does not belong to the past. It belongs to every future that has the courage to hold it. I began writing. If you are reading this, it means this house has lived another life. That is what homes are meant for. Not to be sold like spare furniture, but to hold the sound of people breathing through their days. If you walk the porch during summer, you will hear old wood talk beneath your steps. Don't mistake it for weakness. Wood that doesn't speak was never walked on enough.
I paused, smiled, continued. If you make soup in the kitchen, stir clockwise first. I don't know why, it just always tasted better that way here. If you sit in the living room when it rains, look at the corner window. James once said it framed storms the way a painter would, honest, but not unkind. If you hear something at night, a door shifting, a drawer settling, it's not a ghost, it's memory rearranging itself. Treat it gently. I didn't write this for my children. I wrote it for the house, and whoever one day loved it the way I learned to. Sunday arrived. I roasted chicken the way James liked it, with rosemary and lemon. Andrew washed the potatoes because he insisted. Melissa set plates. We didn't speak about court. We didn't speak about paperwork. We spoke about ordinary things. Rain, work, a neighbor's new dog. Ordinary things are where healing hides. The doorbell rang. The room went still. I knew that knock before it ever came. I opened the door.
Daniel stood there. No legal envelope, no papers, just him. "Smells like Sundays," he said. "It is Sunday," I answered. He nodded once, like a person stepping somewhere he wasn't sure he was welcome. But I stepped aside. He entered slowly, like the air might break if he breathed too loudly. He looked around without touching anything. Then, very quietly, he said, "I forgot how small my hand was when I first held this banister." And just like that, something in the house shifted. Not forgiven, not erased, but shifted. Dinner wasn't easy. Some silences were too tight, some sentences too thin. But no one left early, no voices shook, no doors slammed. When he stood to leave, he didn't ask if he could come again. He said, "I will be better." It wasn't a promise. I no longer needed those. It was a beginning. The next morning, I brought the letter I had written and placed it inside the kitchen drawer beneath the cutlery. People always open the wrong drawers first. Good things should be found by accident sometimes. Then I stepped out onto the porch with tea warming my hands. The maple tree had new leaves, small, green, unbothered by the winter that nearly took them. The wind moved through its branches, and I could almost hear James saying, "There it is, the honest kind of quiet." This house would outlive me. That no longer frightened me, because I hadn't stayed to keep a building standing. I stayed to keep myself standing. Before I went back inside, I whispered to the siding, to the porch steps, to the windows that had watched me age, "I didn't let them take you, and you didn't let life take me." A house and a life holding each other up, still here, still mine until my story ends. And when someone else steps through that door, they will not inherit walls. They will inherit a home that remembers.